episode, we're going to be speaking about the absolutely brilliant, the magnificent, the terrific Mason Mount. This episode is for everyone who has requested Mason Mount, because there are hundreds of you who have. And also for my son Charlie, who's been bugging me to do this episode for a very long time. He may well be Mason Mount's biggest fan. So before we get into this episode properly, we've got to do some of your shout-outs and your messages. So let's get on with them, shall we? The first one is from a big fan of the podcast called Hugo. It says, "Hi Darren, I would like for you to do an episode on Ben White and Zinchenko, please. Please can you give a shout out to my friends George, Marcus, Theo and Joseph. Thank you, from Hugo." Well, thank you very much for your message, Hugo. Thank you for being a listener. A big shout out to all of your friends, George, Marcus, Theo, Joseph and everybody else you know. And a huge shout out to you. Thank you so much for your request. I love the idea of doing an episode on Ben White and one on Zinchenko as well. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. Now, the next one is also from Hugo, but not the same one, a different one. It says, "Hi Darren, my name is Hugo and I'm 5.5 years old. I was born in Australia, but I now live in County Limerick in Ireland, and I play for the under-6s for a local football team called Dromore United. When I grow up, I want to be a goalie for Liverpool, as they are my favourite club. I love listening to your podcast. My favourite episode so far is Haaland the Goal Machine. Please could you make an episode about Diego Maradona, Hugo Lloris, Alisson Becker, Mo Salah and Darwin Núñez? Well, you'll be pleased to know, and if you haven't listened to them yet, there is an episode on Mo Salah and there are 2 episodes on Diego Maradona. Thanks for the great show, from your biggest fan, Hugo." Well, Hugo, thank you so much for being a listener as well. I really appreciate your message and all of your requests. I hope you're getting lots of practice in this summer with your football, and I hope that you've been enjoying listening and learning all about football and footballers on the podcast. And the last one says, "Hi Darren, I'm Dill. I'm 9 years old and I play for Higham Park Rangers under 9s and I support West Ham. Can you please do a shout out about Puskas? West Ham are massive everywhere they go." By the way, Dill didn't say that. I've just still got it stuck in my head from the Europa Cup final. "I love your show and I've told all my friends to listen to it." Well, that is very kind of you, Dill. I thank you very much for that. And Dill finishes his message with a massive So a massive shout out to you, Dill. Thank you so much for being a listener. I really appreciate you getting in touch, and also your request as well. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you are also doing lots of practicing with your football. West Ham are massive everywhere they go. Right, that's all we've got time for in terms of the shout-outs and messages. If you'd like to send a message in, you can ask an adult to send an email to footballforkidspodcast@gmail.com. Right, let's get into the episode, shall we? About the tremendous Mason Mount. Mason Tony Mount was born on the 10th of January in 1999 in Portsmouth. Mason was born into a football family, as his dad was a keen footballer himself. He played in non-league games and later coached football teams including Havant Town in Portsmouth. When Mason was growing up, he was inspired by some players and had some favourites, including Luka Modric and Frank Lampard. It wasn't just footballers he was inspired by though. Mason was inspired by his granddad, who was a boxer in his day, a hard-working and tough man who Mason looked up to. Mason's granddad believed he gets a lot of his determination and his toughness from him. When Mason was young, he was such a hard worker and so ridiculously determined. His determination was something which his dad noticed and was so very proud of. Mason played for a couple of youth teams when he was young, a team called Boar Hunt Rovers and a team called United Services Portsmouth. Those 2 teams ended up coming together to form one team in the end. How talented, skillful and focused Mason was at age 4 years old made him stand out, and because of that, at aged 4, he would start to trade 1 day a week with Portsmouth FC and Chelsea. And at just the age of 6 years old, Mason became a player in the Chelsea Academy. At At school, when Mason was younger, a man came into the school to talk about what the kids wanted to do when they were older. The man asked different children what they wanted to be. One said a policeman, another one said an astronaut, another one said a fireman. And then he asked Mason, "What do you want to do, son?" He said, "I want to be a footballer." And the man looked at him and laughed. He said, "Everyone wants to be a footballer." Almost like he wouldn't achieve it. The lack of belief of others was never going to stop Mason, though. He had a dream and he was going to chase it. Growing up in the youth academy at Chelsea, Mason would train many evenings a week, on the weekend, and then play competitive matches. His parents were dedicated to his football and gave him all the support which he needed. He was so focused at times, his parents would say, "Do you want to go out and do something different tonight, Mason? Go somewhere with your mates or something?" And his response would be, "No, I just want to go training." Not only did he not miss training sessions, but from a young age, he would intensely listen and then put what he had been advised into action pretty quick. Mason's life throughout his childhood was football, football, football. If he wasn't training, he was playing, and if he wasn't watching, he was being a ball boy. When Mason was a ball boy for Chelsea, he has a fond memory of the manager at the time, called Jose Mourinho, coming over to him and the other ball boys. He said that if Chelsea were winning and the other team had a corner or a throw-in, take your time giving them the ball back. That Mourinho was always up to something. We'll have to do an episode on him at a later date. When Mason was 15 years old, he was given the opportunity to go full-time into the Chelsea Academy, where he would balance his football and his school in one place. He was properly looked after, and Chelsea made sure that his education wasn't affected. He was given a private tutor and didn't turn his back on schoolwork, because although he knew he wanted to be a footballer, it was also so very important to do well with his education. So at 15 years old, Mason left his family home in Portsmouth and moved to Chelsea. A big move that showed how dedicated and how much he wanted it. Some of the first team players had heard about how good this kid was in the youth academy, and a player called Ashley Cole watched him one day, and he said that he instantly recognised not only how good he was, but also how much he wanted to learn. He said Mason would turn up to training early, he would give it his all in every training session, like it was his last one on earth. Then he would stay after to do more training by himself. So at aged 18, after all he knew was Chelsea, Mason was loaned out to a Dutch club in Arnhem. Players getting loaned out has always been a common thing to happen. It helps them learn and understand football better, and also about themselves. When Mason Mount moved to Holland to join the Dutch side, he wasn't getting picked to play, which was incredibly frustrating, because at Chelsea, in the youth academy, and in the younger games, he was always being picked to play. Mason would speak to his parents and he would tell them, "I will get on that side. I will start playing. I am determined to." He worked his socks off, both in training and with the little opportunities that he did get to come on and play. And like he said, he would get there. Mason ended up getting many goals and lots of assists, and ended up, at the end of the season, getting the award for Player of the Season. Following on from a season in Holland and winning an award there, Mason was loaned out to another club. This time he was off to play in the Championship, and with Derby. The Championship is one of the toughest leagues to play in. It's a fiercely competitive league, where many matches are played, and young players can develop. The manager at Derby, when Mason was there, was one of the players that he looked up to and was inspired by as a kid. It was Frank Lampard. Although Mason had grown up in the Chelsea Academy, the standard and the expectations were so very high. There were not many players who made it to the first team. Mason knew it would always happen for him though. He had the self-belief. He set himself a goal when he was 6 years old to be in the Chelsea first team. And nothing was going to stop him. And on August 11th, 2019, remember that goal which Mason Mount set himself? Well, he hit it. He made his first team debut in an away match at Old Trafford, and then a week later, he scored his first goal for the team at Stamford Bridge, which was also the managerial home debut of his childhood hero Frank Lampard. What an incredible moment. Mason has gone from strength to strength with the club, appearing well over 120 times, assisting and scoring incredible goals. He's played for his country since the under-16s. He's played in major competitions both with and against some of the best players on the planet. And Mason was asked, what makes a player successful? He said, what makes a player successful? Well, it's hard work. Because a lot of players are talented, but being successful means putting that talent with hard work. Which brings me on to one of my favourite sayings. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Mason Mount is proof that if you've got a dream or a goal, you can do it. It won't always be easy, and it certainly won't be given to you on a plate. You've got to give it your all. Listen, learn, and most importantly, never ever give up. I hope that you've enjoyed listening and learning about the amazing story of Mason Mount so far. So remember, if you know someone who loves football just as much as you do, then please tell them about Football for Kids. And whether you're playing football soon, watching it on the telly or pitchside, I hope that you enjoy the game. See you next time.